नमस्ते। भारत की इतनी प्रगति देख के बहुत ही खुशी होता you know महसूस होती है. So firstly, congratulations to all of you for hosting one of the most spectacular AI summits that the world has ever seen, with about 250,000 attendees. And congratulations to His Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, as well as Minister Vaishnav, for actually bringing us all together to talk about what the possibilities of the future are with AI. So what I thought I'd do is I wanted to actually walk you through where we are today and what the possibilities are and what the constraints are going to be that we need to overcome. But let me just take a step back and say that we are probably moving at a pace that is faster than we've ever either expected or seen before with AI. And we are now squarely in the second phase of AI. So we started with this kind of notion of intelligent chatbots that answered questions for us, that felt like magic 3 years ago. And now we are at this point where agents are conducting tasks and jobs for us almost fully autonomously. And we're actually soon going to go to the third phase, which is physical AI as well. And what this is going to do is fundamentally reimagine work across a multitude of dimensions and vectors that we had never even imagined before. Now, if you think about what AI is doing, is it's basically forcing us to rethink every assumption that we've had in society. And I think a lot of these are going to be positive, and we also need to be mindful of the downsides that might be there. But if you really think deep and long and hard, um, the first thing that I'd say is the modern development process for software development has completely changed and flipped at this point in time, where AI is going to, in fact, at Cisco, we have our first product that was 100% built and coded with AI, where there was no human writing a single line of code, right? The What that actually has as an implication is that your exponential curve of innovation is almost going to feel like a vertical line. And how we need to adjust for that, because right now what's happening is that the rate of change is going to accelerate, but as that acceleration is happening, what you'll find is the absorption rate of technology is still not quite at the same level as the innovation rate of the technology itself. And so rather than having a human in every loop, which is the way that we've thought about it, we need to flip that model and make sure that AI is in every loop rather than thinking about a human in the loop. And the big mindset shift that's starting to occur is this notion that these aren't just productivity tools. These are going to be augmented teammates into our society, where they will be working on behalf of humans, for humans, to go out and conduct things that we actually need additional capacity for. So then the question to ask is, what could hold progress back for AI? And we think there are three things that could fundamentally be impediments for the progress of AI. The first one is an infrastructure constraint. And what I mean by that is there's just not enough power, compute, and network bandwidth in the world. Now there's not enough memory, enough capacity to build out the data centers. These are massive constraints, and infrastructure is oxygen for AI. So if you don't have enough amount of infrastructure, you're not going to be able to make sure that you can fulfill and harness the full potential of AI. So infrastructure is the first big constraint that we see. The second big constraint is this notion of a context gap. If we think of each one of us in our lives, the way that we think about acknowledging, kind of, gathering information is we are taking trillions of tokens of context every second and assessing it in our brains and actually informing ourselves of what we need to do as we move forward. These agents are going to need to have that same level of context enrichment. And if they don't, they'll still make decisions, but they're not going to be very good decisions. So the second one is this fundamental context gap. And then the third area is a trust deficit. If you don't trust these systems, you're never going to be able to use them. And you'll actually see that there's an impedance to adoption as a result of the absence of trust. So you have to make sure that you actually start to think about safety and security at a fundamentally different level than what we've seen before. And if you think about what the new metric for success is, the new metric for global competitiveness moving forward is our ability to safely, securely, and efficiently generate tokens for the use of AI, right? And every country and every company is going to actually get measured by your ability to safely, securely, and efficiently generate tokens, and that'll directly impact your economic prosperity as well as national security. So let's go into each one of these three constraints and talk about like what the dynamics are and how do we need to make sure that we overcome them. Because if you look at the pattern on the infrastructure side, specifically with what's happening with agents, what you're starting to see is as we move from chatbots to agents, the pattern of inferencing is going from this very spiky kind of compute, consumption that used to happen to a much more steady state, kind of persistent demand signal that you're starting to see in the market, right? And that'll have a very, very different level of infrastructure requirements than what we might have seen before. And so I think we have to keep that in mind as we're building out the rest of, these kind of token generation factories that we're building out. We'll need to make sure that they can actually accommodate for that second, kind of behavior model rather than the first one. Now, as you go into the context gap, imagine this. Imagine if you're an ER doctor, and imagine that you actually had an unresponsive patient and you had no charts on the patient, you had no history about the patient, you had no symptoms that you knew that the patient was experiencing. How would you be able to go treat that patient? You might still be able to do it, but you're going to make a bunch of guesses, right? An agent without context is still going to make decisions, but those decisions might not be the kind of decisions we want that agent to make. And so we have to make sure that we figure out effective and efficient ways to enrich context for that agent, for the AI. And it's, if you, in the absence of that, it's just going to be forced to guess. And those guesses are as good as you flipping a coin and, heads showing up. So how do you close that context gap? And so the way you close the context gap, the first one is these models have been trained on human generated data that's publicly available on the internet. But we're running out of human generated data publicly available on the internet. So now what you're starting to see is there's a tremendous amount of enterprise data that's actually intellectual property of these companies. Can we make sure that we can enrich these models with this proprietary enterprise data for the purposes of that organization so that they can create competitive differentiation, right? And so the first one is this notion of connecting enterprise data to AI and agents. The second big area is this notion of enriching agents with machine data. Because right now what you see is most of the data is human generated data that these AI models have actually been using. We need to make sure that we use machine data. What does machine data mean? It's time series data. When something, you and all of us humans, we start our day by actually consuming machine data. We might check the weather. That's machine data. But as you have more and more agents, 55% of the growth of data in the world is going to be machine data. As these agents work 7 by 24, you'll have much, much more data and logs, metrics, events, traces that'll actually need to be consumed. So that second area of agents being enriched with machine data is going to be critical for these agents actually operating with a sufficient level of context. And third is you have to embed AI in every workflow. You can't just actually think about that as I'm just going to have a tool that augments to my broken process. You have to fundamentally rethink the process that accommodates these agents. Agents don't adjust to us. We have to adjust our process to the agents so that they can actually be effective for us. So that's the second big area, is the context gap. And then the third area that we talked about was this notion of a trust deficit. And in AI, the risk with AI now is no longer that AI is going to give us the wrong answer. The risk with AI is going to take the wrong action. And when you actually start having an AI take the wrong action, the consequences are far more grave than just giving you the wrong answer. So what do we have to do? So there's two areas that we think are going to be really important. The first one is we got to make sure that these agents get protected from the world, which means that jailbreaking an agent, having prompt injection attacks, making sure that there's a level of tool abuse or data poisoning. We have to make sure that we can protect the agents from that happening. And then the second thing we have to do is we have to make sure that we can protect the world from the agents so that the agent starts going rogue. It starts having behavior that's unintended, that we can actually make sure that we can provide effective guardrails at runtime, because no longer is governance a document. It's going to be a runtime implementation so that as the agent is working, if you start seeing that the agent's doing something that's not going to be in the best interest of humans, we have to be able to inject guardrails into that dynamically at runtime so that we can make sure that creates a level of trust for the system. Now, it turns out that Cisco is actually building solutions across all of these three areas. And so the way that we think about ourselves is we want to invent and innovate in making sure that the critical infrastructure for the AI era is as simple to deploy, as safe and secure as we want it to be, and as context enriched as it can be. So what are we doing? We're building networks that agents will run on. We're building context that makes it richer for these agents to operate in a way that allows us to make sure that we can delegate safely and securely to them and feel good about the outcomes that we're going to get. And we're going to make sure that we're going to have security that governs these agents. And all of this is going to be done with a tremendous amount of observability and visibility that says in every layer of the stack, from the way that the GPU is getting utilized, to how the model is performing, to how the apps are being built, to how the agents are performing, we can have observability from bottom to top in the entire stack. Because if we can do that and figure out that every company, every country is generating tokens in the most effective and secure way, then you're going to see that there's progress being made. Now, why is this a tremendous opportunity for India? Because India is not just going to use AI. The way that we've seen over the course of the past week is you're actually helping shape the direction of the entire world with AI. And I think there's a few key areas that we should all feel very hopeful for, and why India can be a tremendous contributor to AI for the rest of the world. Not just for India, but for the entire world. The first one is we have a huge talent pool of young, vibrant, intelligent, smart, educated people within India that actually contribute to the workforce. We've got one of the largest groups of people under 30 that are actually going out and contributing to the economy. Number two is we have a very strong digital foundation, having common identity with Aadhaar, having UPI. These are things that we in India you all might take for granted, but these are very rare to come by in countries, especially at scale. And third, India actually has massive, massive scale. And why is that important? Because AI works best with scale. Because AI works best when you have the most amount of data, right? And so the way I think about this is we have a tremendous opportunity ahead of us. Now, the future is not going to be built by AI alone. In fact, the future gets built when humans can confidently put AI to work and delegate jobs and tasks to AI in a way that we feel safe and secure. And so I'm actually as hopeful as I've ever been. However, I also feel like there's tremendous amount of risks of these things can go going sideways. And so we as a community have to band together and make sure that we actually work as an ecosystem to keep AI safe and secure. Because if we do that in the right way, we're going to solve the hardest problems that humanity has faced and reduce and hopefully end suffering in so many different areas. We might be able to cure the hardest diseases that we've not been able to overcome. We might be able to overcome poverty. We might be able to overcome the gaps around education so that can be evenly distributed to people. We can make sure that we can improve people's quality of lives. So I think there's a lot to be excited about, but those constraints need to be kept in mind. And we are so grateful to be partnering with India in this journey ahead. So thank you all.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.